cherry stone carved with St. George and the Dragon on one side and the precise likeness of 88 emperors upon the other. Blood that reigned in the Isle of Wight, and of course the dodo stuffed. These delights were all to be found in Tredescant's Ark, which was the first cabinet of curiosities which was to develop into the first public museum in England in the 17th century. These cabinets, as they were called, were either pieces of furniture or whole rooms that bulged with curiosities. They were collections of rarities and relics that were bought, for the most part, from far off and unknown lands. The earliest cabinet to survive intact is at Canterbury, with the collection amassed by Canon John Bargrave in the 1600s, when he travelled extensively throughout Europe and also went to Algeria. On his journey home he was accompanied by a pet chameleon, who he used to enjoy playing with very much, and prodding it, I'm afraid to say, with a bodkin to watch it change colour. It was fed on flies and sweetmeats every day, but when the flies ran out as they entered the northern climes, the poor little creature died. He was immediately stuffed into this most frolicsome attitude by the ship's surgeon, and even today the little creature's tail waves gaily to itself in the dark cabinet drawer, where it's laid for over 300 years. An exceedingly curious item to find in the distinguished canon's cabinet is the finger of the Frenchman from Toulouse, which he acquired from a Franciscan monastery, where he had been told there existed a most curious atmosphere, where all the corpses there in the crypt did not decay, but were held together with a kind of living force. There was a soldier who'd been knifed in the heart, and he was there propped up against the wall with his hand over the wound. Bargrave went up, lifted the hand off, and said that it returned immediately with a lusty clap onto the body. He tried it several times, and each time it had the same terrifying, resounding effect. Remains of other cabinets are to be found in the most unexpected of places. The Cuming Museum is at Southwark, a few steps away from the delightful underpass at the Elephant and Castle. Richard Cuming was born in 1777, and he started collecting when he was only 5. And when he was 14, he built a beautiful little marbleized cardboard cabinet to put all his trifles in. And from then on, he collected for 88 years, and indeed the week before he died, he just dissected a beaver. But there's one exhibit here that encapsulates for me all the glory and wonder of the Cabinet of Curiosities, that one should be able to find here in Southwark, a crystal that was knocked off a chandelier by Napoleon's coffin that was passing underneath it. He collected a mass of extraordinary curiosities, and there were such delights as a fragment of Pope's willow tree. Alexander Pope, the 18th century poet, planted what he thought was the very first weeping willow tree in England. He was with Lady Suffolk, who was unpacking a parcel from Spain, and he noticed that one of the twigs that were reinforcing her package had saplings growing out of it, and he said, "I wonder if this is something we have not in England," planted it, and there grew in his garden in Twickenham this willow tree, under which he wrote most of his eminent works. And this was particularly beguiling, that in this age of discovery, the magic of an entirely new culture could be brought into your home. And certainly I could feel it when my son brought me back from South America this curiosity, which is a lump of sugarcane surrounded by bark. But the magic of staring at this strange and unknown object and having a link with this strange and unknown culture is intoxicating. As too with these masks. So beautiful.
And so strange.
There was another terrifyingly flamboyant South American traveller called Charles Waterton, Squire of Walton Hall near Wakefield in Yorkshire. He was an adventurer, a taxidermist, a naturalist, an explorer, and according to Edith Sitwell, a gay, loving and chivalrous saint, which is not a surprise, as he was in fact descended from a number of saints, including St. Margaret of Scotland and St. Anne of Russia. Once whilst in South America, he set about catching a caiman, an enormous 14-foot-long crocodile. But suddenly, seeing enough, he said, not to fall in love at first sight with the creature, he leapt with electrifying resolve onto its back and wrapped its little legs around his shoulders to act as a bridle, and was hauled ashore to the vociferous roars of his helpers. It was the first and the last time that I had been on a caiman's back, Waterton wrote. And should I be asked how I managed such a dexterous feat, I would be able to answer, "Sir, I have ridden for many years with Lord Darlington's foxhounds." He always wanted to be bitten by a vampire bat, and used to lie night after night in his tent with his big toe exposed in the hope that it would, but it never came. He did, however, catch the bat, and it's there, rather frighteningly faded to white now. His eating habits were colourfully cosmopolitan. He sampled wasps from this very nest by way of a dessert, but my stomach was offended by their intrusion, he wrote. He also found boiled ant bear delectable, but not so monkey, which he said was rather too like a species of our own kind when skinned, and the delicate stomach really would recoil from attacking it with a knife and fork. Waterton was a serious naturalist. It's just that the astonishing nature of his exploits often blind one to this fact. One day a friend, Dr. Harley, was visiting him at Walton Hall and admiring all the exhibits in their mahogany cases, which still survive today, and said to him, "How beautifully your animals are stuffed." "Stuffed?" roared Waterton. "Allow me to inform you, sir, there's no stuffed animal in this house." And with that he gave Harley the polecat's head to hold, and in a trice Waterton flicked away the body, and poor Harley was left with the head. Because inside it was hollow, perfectly hollow, nothing was stuffed. It's simply that Waterton's method of preserving animals was unique. He didn't put any wires or straw or stuffing of any kind in, but soaked the skin in a solution of mercury and then moulded it carefully with warm water and a sponge so that the contours flowed as the animal was when alive. He made an alarming set of what he called his creations, which in fact were rather harmful to his reputation as far as his credibility went. There was John Bull in the National Debt, a horrible creature surrounded by nasty little devils. But most damning of all was the nondescript. This creature with a face that was thought to have been made from a red howler monkey's behind. And he wrote delightfully, "The features of this animal are quite of the Grecian cast, and he has a placidity of countenance which shows that things went well for him in life." At Arundel in Sussex, there are even more startling sights to be seen in the world of the stuffed animal. Walter Potter was a taxidermist of incomparable humour, charm and originality. He was a countryman through and through. It is said he never ventured more than 5 miles away from his village of Bramber in Sussex, except when he got married, when he went 6. When he was 9, he began stuffing creatures, which he went on doing for another 60 years without a single day's instruction. The magnificent goat came from Wiston Park nearby, but it grew so wild and active, according to Potter, and led all the other goats astray to such a degree, and also bit its owner, Mr. Charles Goring, once or twice, that he shot it. It is ridden here by a monkey who was the pet of a sailor from Shoreham. And one day this poor little creature escaped and stole some fruit from a greengrocer's, only to have a bucket of icy cold water thrown on it from a window above, from which it died instantly of the shock.
I want you to have perhaps one of the most famous of all old nursery rhymes. Just sit down and listen.
Who killed Cock Robin?
I said the sparrow with my bow and arrow. I killed Cock Robin.
Who saw him die?
I said the fly with my little eye.
Who caught his blood? I said the fish with my little dish.
Who dig his grave?
I said the owl with my little troll.
Who'll be the parson?
I said the rook with my bell and book.
Who told the bell?
I said the bull because I can pull. I'll toll the bell.
All the birds in the air were a-sighing and a-stopping when they heard of the death of poor Cock Robin. When they heard of the death of poor Cock Robin.
Potter's museum belongs to James Cartland, who lives nearby in a house brimming with curiosities. He has also made up his own cabinet, full of extraordinary relics.
It's got a silk cushion to rest its head on.
Poor birdie with his head resting. His head's not attached to his body either.
Well, after 180 years. This is rather good too. Look, hold your hand out again.
I'm not sure I want to.
It's all right.
What is
no,
it?
it's a piece of the canopy which covered the mortal remains of the great Lord Nelson on board His Majesty's barge Nelson. These are bits of Queen Victoria's children's wedding dresses.
James, how wonderful.
Look, Princess Beatrice's wedding dress. There we are. That's that one.
Oh, what is it?
Oh, that's the remains of a candle carried at Princess Charlotte's funeral.
Where's that corn from in there?
Oh, it was found on the battlefield of Waterloo. 1827, so it's only 12 years after the battle.
Cigar smoked by Sir Winston Churchill.
He's chewed it a lot. Look at the end. It's still got his lick on it. Maori axe, you see. So it's got all sorts of things in it.
Yeah, the Maori culture has never wildly appealed to me. Their heads were very popular. And the English bijou.
You know what this is, do you? Yes,
Yeah,
of course you do.
scrumptious.
I'll just remove the dust. It's a pancake from Westminster School,
Yeah.
1895 one, and they throw it over a wall.
Yes, yes.
In the old days, apparently the one who caught it, or a bit of it, was given a guinea.
Yes.
And you could keep it. And the bright spark who won this one, whose name is Guy Simmons, in 1895,
Yes.
Shrove Tuesday, he had it mounted like a Venetian relic.
Relics were thought to be particularly beguiling items. Catherine Parr's tooth is to be found at Sudeley Castle in Gloucestershire, and Disraeli's blood was kept at Keble College, Oxford, until one terrible night when the fellows drank too much. Tredescant had collected a mantle of greatest beauty belonging to Powhatan, the Indian king of Virginia, who was Pocahontas' father, and it is now in the Ashmolean, richly embroidered with shells, and is a particular interest to me, as Powhatan happens to be my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. The museum in Welshpool, and it's just the place to nip into and enjoy, where you'll find such delights, most unusual, if I may say so, in the north of Wales, mid-Wales, I beg your pardon, as this mysterious fragment of wallpaper, said to be the very wallpaper that was responsible for the death of Napoleon in St. Helena. Shields green was the virulent substance inside it, arsenic-containing pigment. It was a mould that formed when the room was damp, and Longwood on St. Helena was notorious in that respect for being very grim and damp in the atmosphere. And when the mould formed, it fought with the arsenic, and a terrible vapour was converted from the mould, which seeped from the pleasing decoration in the room, which is a horrifying thought. It is well known that Napoleon was suffering from arsenic poisoning, with shivering and swelling of the limbs and stomach upsets. And it's a fascinating theory to think these evil forces were at work, seeping from the flowers on the walls. I feel that a word had better be said about this brilliant green, emerald green, being bright and vivid blue today, but it is simply that it is aged that way.
Everyone a winner at Weber's.
There are relics of the most sinister nature to be found at Bury St. Edmunds. They all relate to William Corder, who murdered Maria Martin in the Red Barn at Polstead in 1827. Corder was the son of a well-to-do farming family. Maria was the daughter of a mole catcher and was of a humbler state of life at the times, and intimacy of a very close nature took place, and the illegitimate child was the fruit of it. So they planned to marry and set off to Ipswich, but she was never seen alive again. Maria's stepmother said she had dreamt several times of the girl's body being in the Red Barn, and finally her husband was dispatched with his mole spud and found the corpse. Why, we do not know, but she was in full man's rigard with a red flannel petticoat and stays underneath it. When he was executed at Bury St. Edmunds, it was a national holiday with thousands of people coming. Poor Corday, after having had mournful consolation from the Reverend Stocking, the prison chaplain, he was hung in front of this vast, ghoulish crowd. In Drury Lane in London that night, Macbeth was being performed, and with the lines, "Is execution done on Corder?" a man cried out from the gallery, "Yes, he was hung this morning at Bury." After his death, George Creed, the surgeon, prepared and tanned his skin for binding this book, this account of the trial and execution. It's the most sinister object. And holding this book, it's a very upsetting experience, because if you inspect closely, you can see the human paws and the hairs, and any part of one's fingers that touch it feel a damp gloom on their tips. Gentlemen's societies provided another fruitful area in the world of collecting when they founded small and elegant museums all over the country, such as the Rotonda at Scarborough, built in 1828. Bramwell Bronte is supposed to have smoked opium in the chaste and classical upper gallery. You set off like a tram to glide round the exhibits in the top cases here to inspect them at your leisure. Luxury glide around, including a black rat, 2 snouts of a swordfish, and the fine molar tooth of an elephant, which was one of the first exhibits. Now, there were so many of these creatures, my goodness, this is exciting. There were so many of these creatures that they were all moved to Sir George Sitwell's old house. His father-in-law was the lavish Lord Lonsborough, the patron of the Scarborough Philosophical Society, and there was no figure on earth more lavish than Lord Lonsborough. His first act was to issue all who worked for him with blank checkbooks, which they could spend as they wished without bothering him. And whenever the family came to Scarborough, they would have a red carpet laid down from the house to the town, a whole mile of red carpet, which was laid down whenever they ventured forth. Well, I'll just show you what speed one can go in if the exhibit's displeased one. You still have a very good view of them. Nearby in Whitby, the museum was founded by the Literary and Philosophical Society in 1823. The happily named Dr. George Merriweather created this delightful invention. He called it his atmospheric electromagnetic telegraph, conducted by animal instinct, but with great wisdom changed it soon to the Tempest Prognosticator. 2 words, he said, that all foreigners could understand. Now, the top is a bell on which there are 12 little hammers all the way round, attached to 12 bottles below with a little chain. Dr. Merriweather put the leeches into the bottom of each bottle, and when this storm was brewing, the leeches sprung into active life, and getting up to the top of the bottle, dislodged the whalebone, which sent the chain a-moving, which sent the hammer a-hammering, and in no time 12 little hammers were hammering on the ornate bell, telling of the storm that was on its way. He also exhibited it a year later at the Great Exhibition, where the tumultuous acclaim, applause and praise for it made him very confident that his little Whitby pygmy temple would be distributed throughout the world. But sadly it wasn't, as it is a little easier to use a barometer. Small societies are still founding museums today. At March, in the Fens, the tiny little schoolhouse has been transformed into an entrancing museum, laid out in a traditionally delightful way, cramming as many exhibits in as will fit, so that walking round, you have the pleasure of your own discovery, instead of being faced with a blank wall, 1 chosen exhibit, and 2 foot of typewritten paper. The jewel of the collection here is a cabinet made by Mr. James Green. He was a Sunday school superintendent who loved his stout, and a keen local lecturer on such subjects as wireless, microscopes, bookbinding, and the universe. In other words, he was a substantial and worthy Victorian figure who was interested in everything and anything. And here, in exquisitely fine slide carriers, marked with all manner of gold whorls and designs, are the lips of a fly, the gizzard of a shrimp, the palate of a snail, and all so finely wrought, the polariscope of a polar bear, whatever that might be, the kneecap of a fly. Flies, by the way, feature very prominently at the pit rivers in Oxford, where they're dressed as ballet dancers in little tutus. The flea from a dog. There are fleas dressed up in the museum entry with Mexican costumes. And in Edinburgh there are some fleas getting married. Another most pleasurable tradition was the family museum, which, thank heavens, has not been abandoned. And my former mother-in-law, with the help of her grandchildren, has triumphed with golden knobs on in that respect.
Come on, Lucy. Let's go and have a look at the museum.
Look at the sign there.
Oh, look. There's a notice. Look, in case you've got lost.
Billa Harrod has collected a wealth of family mementos, including some from her great-great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Fry.
Do you want to see Elizabeth Fry's
Very much, yeah.
bracelet made of her hair, which is rather a wonderful thing, I think. Well, it's very old, you see. I mean, it's 140 years old or more.
Peculiar, it's so stiff.
Yes, be careful of it, because it's stiff, I think, because it's old and it could crack.
Look at it, how wonderful.
Didn't she have nice colored hair? And there's a letter from Kipling. Have you seen that?
Nope.
Smilvis Hotel, Cairo. Very sorry he couldn't come to lunch. Yours safely. Rudyard Kipling.
Rudyard
That's
Kipling.
rather nice, regretfully.
Oh, lovely. Lovely writing paper. And romantic it being from Cairo, did it?
Well, not very, as everybody was living there at the time, but that, I think, is a cigarette holder used by Queen Mary when she once came to tea. So it is rather historical, that. Thrown away by her, but rescued by us, naturally.
I heard a wonderful story once of Queen Mary. Did I ever tell you the story?
Yes, you did. It's not true.
Well, the story is that after visiting an entrancing shell museum nearby, the vicar was sitting down to tea with Queen Mary, and conversation flagged for a moment, and so he, in desperation, took the woolen tea cosy and put it on his head in the hope that it would raise a smile and start the ball rolling again of lively talk. But Queen Mary didn't acknowledge that he'd even done it, and the poor fellow was too shy to take it off and too shy to point it out that it was on, and the whole of the rest of tea was spent with the vicar sitting at the head of the table with a woolen tea cosy on top of his head.
But here's a message from the Prime Minister. Because all one can ever think of is Dad's army when one reads that now.
I love the stand firm and carry on and stand firm again, bringing capital letters.
It's extraordinary, I think, to think that that was quite serious, you know. We all took it absolutely seriously. How lucky we were that it never happened. This belonged to my father, who was killed at Mons, August 1914. He was one of the first officers to be killed in the war. Doesn't really come out very easily, so I've never been able to get it out. Oh, you have, well done. It's rather thrilling, isn't it? That's a wonderful book, a wonderful, wonderful scrapbook. That's one of my favourites, the Christmas dinner. Don't you think that's lovely?
Yes,
With
the size of it.
Yes, a sirloin, you see, and a huge round Christmas pudding. And we always have a sirloin because we hate turkeys.
That sirloin is very, very much bigger than the dog.
I think a sirloin would be, because after all, a beef is bigger than a dog. And that's very sweet, the donks. Lovely cart horse. I used to show it to my little boys when they were very small. They hardly knew what a horse was. That's just nature, which is rather boring, I think. Now, this is much nicer. I like things happening. Kind young lady, look, do you see? And she ends by taking that child to church, who doesn't appear as unwilling as it would nowadays. Wouldn't be considered a kindness now, would it? Think of some grandmother doing it. That's what I think is so wonderful. Much as I love my grandchildren, I'd never, ever, ever, ever have been able to do anything like this for them. One of my grandchildren told me proudly he never read a book. Did he? Yes, he did. I was rather shocked. Especially as I'd given him rather a lot of expensive books and stuck book plates in them, too.
A collection that weaves the family and the world together is to be found at Erddig in North Wales. Erddig was lived in almost continuously for 200 years by the York family. There were 4 Simons and 3 Philips. The Simons were a little dull, the Philips were exceedingly dazzling. They modernized nothing and threw very little away, and the last of the line, Philip, revelled in it all.
I had an aunt who became a Roman Catholic, and she used to send us lots of things blessed by the Pope, and my father didn't really know what to do with them, so he said, well, let's put them in the chapel. So there we have 2, can't remember their names. And then here is a chalice, and my father wrote a poem about it and everything else, and he said, Chalice and pattern richly wrought were long ago from ruin brought. These are with scripture scenes embossed, though not of any special cost. What he was rather pleased with was this old family pattern. He said that if you put enough money in the dish, the hands begin to move.
Philip York died 9 years ago, only 2 years after he had given the house to the National Trust. It was in the most lamentable state of disrepair, as a lot of mining work beneath the house had caused terrible subsidence.
This room, of course, has suffered more than anything. We call it the state bedroom because it's in such an awful state.
He was loved by everyone who knew him. A friend of mine can remember once going there for dinner and Philip York having discovered the wonder of angel delight. Do you know this new delicious, scrumptious dish, he said. And all of the people, there were some 10 of them there, were all given a different coloured packet of angel delight and set to work whisking with various implements in bowls around the kitchen table, to the accompaniment of a wind-up gramophone and Philip York playing the Blue Danube on a saw. There is a family museum at Erddig where every aspect of the Cabinet of Curiosities can be enjoyed. Underneath this charming relic of a bird's nest embedded in a plastic light fitting, and beside the arrow case from Africa are the butterflies, which were contributed to a large degree by George Dickinson, the butler, who helped the children catch chloroform and mount them. And he, poor fellow, himself died of chloroform some years later at Erddig. A most curious coincidence noted Mrs. York in her diaries. There are such delightful items as this, a exhibit of utmost importance, which is found in a hot water pipe, July 1929, and it is a small nodule of calcification. And then, all these charming labels. Oh look, I've banged a blowfish. This is consolidated milk made by Captain Hipples's chauffeur, Stone Eastern Park, Somerset, given in 1919. And for some inexplicable reason, there's an appealing shade of rose pink. Here are 2 pieces of twisted metal, and on this crunch bit of twisted metal, and on this straight bit of twisted metal, are 2 important words: American aeroplane. Now, this is a perfect example of something which nobody in their right mind would preserve and collect and put in a cabinet, but which is so charmful and interesting. And as Philip York said when he showed people around the house, whenever we find anything we don't know what to do with it, we all cry, let's put it in the museum. At Barnard Castle in County Durham, a family museum of awesome proportions rose up in 1892. It was built by John and Josephine Bowes to house their immense collection of some 15,000 objects. In the spirit of the 19th century, Bowes wanted to get away from the Cabinet of Curiosities side of museums to the more elevating realms of tapestries, pictures and furniture. He had once seen bones from the 11,000 Virgins in Cologne Cathedral when he was 19 years old and had penned a memo never to go near that again. There are still a few curiosities here. The swan was first heard of in 1773 in Cox's museum. It was made by John Joseph Merlin. He was a suave figure in society, and I'm afraid sometimes mocked, as when he proudly showed off his invention of roller skates and glided into a Mrs. Cronley's reception with skates on his feet, tails on his back, and playing the violin. He sailed in to this grand gathering, but forgotten, indeed I suppose hadn't catered at all at any point, or how to stop. And so went at full tilt, playing the violin, his head high, his nose high with pride, and smashed into an enormous and valuable mirror, breaking both the violin, the mirror, and injuring himself, I'm afraid to say, very badly. Originally, the swan was under an immense 18-foot-high canopy of rocks, crystals, jewels, and silver and mirrors. Apparently, on the top, there was a golden sun which sent rays down, shimmering into all this richness. But poor Cox couldn't stand the cost of these extravagances, and after only 11 months, the collection was disbanded, by public lottery, in fact, which he had to have a special act of Parliament to allow him to do. And there was a most rousing song, which must be sung to the tune of the roast beef of old England to celebrate this grand sale. Here sea-birds of jewels their plumage unfold, here fly ruby lizards, here chase snakes of gold, and wonders too mighty in words to be told are prizes in Cox's new lottery. Oh, haste and buy tickets from Cox. I do not expect that has been sung very much since 1773.
Before you go, if you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. And please, share the heckings out of this video. Ta-ra.